Hello and welcome to the Great Lakes Fishing Podcast. Today we're joined by Captain Richard Brant from Real Action Charters. And Captain Richard Brant is a Western New Yorker. Captain, welcome to the show.
How you doing?
Doing great, man. Thanks for coming on. Tell us and our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am born and raised in Buffalo, New York. I actually live about 10 minutes from Lake Erie, and I'm about a half hour from Lake Ontario. I'm a local charter out of multiple ports. I don't dedicate myself to one lake. I fish the Great Lakes from Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, the Lower Niagara, the Upper Niagara, targeting multiple species. And that's pretty much it.
Very good. Your charter is Real Action Charters. Tell us a little bit about Real Action Charters.
So about Real Action Charters is that I started it. I'm going on my 6th year as a guide now, and I was just a fun fisherman, weekend fisherman every day with my buddies. I got inspired to go get my captain's license from a local guide as well, and he told me to go get it, so I did that, and I decided to make a business out of it, and it took forever to figure out the name, and there's a lot of people, unfortunately, with Real Action Charters, but they're all in Florida. There's guys in other parts of New York, and it was just a headache, and I finally got it started, and what I like to do is I go out and try to make people's day. That's it.
Yeah, so you fish out of a trailerable boat. Like you said, you fish out of multiple ports. I know you just got a new boat this year. Tell us a little bit about your boat.
I did. I actually bought a Nitro ZV21. It's got a 350 Verado on it. It's got a 20-horse Mercury Pro XS kicker on there. I actually was in a Lund Pro V 20-foot boat for a while, and just the price was right, and I decided to pull the trigger on it and get a fiberglass boat. I wasn't going to get a lake boat, and I thought about it really hard, but then I was like, well, I don't want to have both. I really don't. I like the option of going from Lake Erie one day to next day Lake Ontario, and then I like to fish in wintertime as well, like I said, in the gorge.
So you went from that Lund to the Nitro, said you went into fiberglass. Tell us a little bit about that change from going to an aluminum boat to fiberglass and why you did that.
I didn't think it would be too much of a difference, but I can say it's a major difference. It's a lot heavier. It's, I think, 2,500 pounds heavier, and it just handles the rougher water a lot more. I mean, you can go a little bit faster. I mean, can you go 35, 40 and 3-4 footers? No, but you probably can, but you're going to beat up your boat. It's definitely a major difference. It doesn't lift as much if you're leaning on one side. If you're going with the waves, it doesn't feel like it drags, like where the back end of it will kind of lift with it as well. But other than that, it's a major difference. It's bigger. It's 8 foot 9 inches wider, and it's 2 more feet longer. And it's just a bulldog in the rough water.
Yeah, so having that just a little bit more weight and a little more size is going to help you kind of carry that water when you're in some heavier storm or heavier water anyway with those waves. Tell us a little bit about how you fish. And I guess if someone called and said, hey, what are we going to do today? How does that conversation go?
How that conversation goes, like, say, Chris, if you called me and said, I want to go out fishing, I'll ask you, well, what do you have in mind? Do you want to go Lake Ontario and catch king salmon? Do you want to go to Lake Erie, catch walleye? Kind of narrow it down from there. And then if you were like, well, I just want to catch fish, and I'd be like, well, do you want to eat fish? Do you want multiple fish? Do you want to have a shorter day, longer day? And I usually try to chase whatever's biting the most. I mean, right now I am on Lake Erie. I've been fishing Lake Erie for the last week. I was out there this morning. It was pretty rough. We didn't get blown off the water. We just called it a day around 1 o'clock. There was probably 3 to 5, occasional 5, nothing crazy, but we caught 30 walleye, and we were well over our limit by 9 o'clock this morning, and we ended up letting the rest go and called it a day. But I just pretty much chased the bite, and from here on out, most of the guys in my area want walleye.
What port were you guys fishing out of this morning?
We were bottom bouncing 4 rods with number 4 Colorado blades and really small 6mm beads, and actually smaller number 4 hooks, only one of them, and using a half a worm. It's a little different than some people do. And then we were using 3-color lead, which is a new Suffix lead. It goes about 7 to 8 feet of color. At the walleye speeds, I was going about 1.8 to 2.2.
Whereabouts were you guys fishing today?
So we were fishing Small Boat Harbor, which would be closest to the Peace Bridge, and that would be considered like the northern part of Lake Erie. And well, if you're looking at a map, it would be like northwest. We fished what we call the elbow. It's where the Canadian American line meet in the city of Buffalo, and it actually makes like a perfect little elbow. And we were we were pretty much in between 35 and 42 feet of water.
Very cool. Tell us a little bit about the seasonalities in with that area. I know that there's a huge walleye migration in Lake Erie, and typically this time of year, a lot of those fish are west. Obviously, you guys had a lot of bites today. Tell us about the seasonalities of that kind of section of Lake Erie that you're fishing.
Okay, so the section of Lake Erie that we're fishing now, I'm a firm believer they're all local fish. I have not seen a lot of migratory fish. Like some people, everybody's opposite. Some guys say there's migratory fish here. I don't think there is, because once the middle of July comes and it's really hot, I mean, we're really shallow. We're like the Port Clinton side of Lake Erie. Our average depth over here is like 50 feet max in Buffalo. So these are a lot of local fish, and they're all healthy, 4 to 6 pounds. I mean, we caught one 8-pounder the other day, another 9-pounder. But I mean, there is some big fish in Buffalo, big females. As the seasons goes on, that migratory school of fish come from the west, and they work their way to the deeper water, which would be considered like Northeast Pennsylvania, Barcelona, Dunkirk, New York. And then once you start hitting like Cattaraugus Creek and the sturgeon, it starts to shallow up and go into the Buffalo end. Once like middle of July comes, I fish out of Cattaraugus Creek, and I always travel west to Dunkirk, and it's about a 9 to 14 mile run where I fish, and I like to fish anywhere from 80 feet to 100 foot of water.
And you guys were just in a salmon tournament recently up on Lake Ontario. Tell me about that salmon tournament.
I fished with my good buddy Matt Yablonsky. He is the owner of WetNet Charters. He's actually the one that inspired me to go get my license and become a guide. Me and him just became really close friends. He's helped me out with a lot of things, especially on Lake Ontario. I was not a big Lake Ontario fisherman. Within the last 7 years, I started fishing it like hard, as many trips as I possibly can. Especially last year, I was out there, I think 40 or 50 days straight. And that was all the way from end of March all the way until the beginning of June. And then I stopped for a little bit, went on Lake Erie, and then I came back and finished up the year in July in Lake Ontario. The Niagara Pro-Am we were fishing, it is not an easy fishing tournament. It's in the pro division, it's your first 12 legal fish, and it's 15 inches up, and it goes by points versus weight. So it's like 1 point per pound, 10 points per fish. So your goal is just get 12 fish, not a 20-pound mature king, or let's get a 15-pound steelhead. You just need to get 12 legal fish in the box, and then you get your points, and then the second day you go from there.
That's a really interesting format that I guess it really behooves you to go out and catch as many fish as possible as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And your time, too. You only got about 6 hours.
Yeah, so a quick deal. Where did you guys fish out of? What port were you fishing out of for the tournament?
Well, both ports is either Wilson or Olcott. We were out of Wilson, and we just stayed in front of the harbor. Stay what you know. Fish the water you charter out of. You don't want to run too far, so you stick out there. And we were in between, I think, if I can remember, we were in about 200 feet of water all the way out to about 390 feet. And we were fishing anywhere from 10 feet down to 60 feet down.
Is that typically the port that you're fishing out of for your charter as well?
Yes. If I'm going to run for Lake Ontario, I go out of Wilson, yes.
Wilson, yeah. So tell me a little bit about that port. I was actually out there last spring, but share some information, kind of how that port sets up and how you're fishing out of there.
I like the port personally a little more than anything. It's a nicer boat launch for me. I mean, there's no cleaning station, so we do have to drive. I don't clean fish on the boat. I go to the actual cleaning station, so I do go to Olcott. We clean. What I like about that port is that you're 12 miles from the Niagara River, so if you wanted to fish Niagara Bar, you're within that. And if you wanted to go towards Olcott or Oak Orchard, you're another, I believe, 8 to 10. Oak Orchard is a little bit of a hike from Wilson, actually.
So tell me a little bit about your kind of your favorite setup. If I was going to go on charter with you tomorrow and we're going to go fish salmon out of Wilson, what are we going to be fishing? What's that setup going to look like?
So I like to run 2 downriver. Well, first of all, I put a fish hawk in the water. First you got to find a temperature break. This time of the year, I'm looking for cold water. I'm looking for 43 to 48 degree water. I actually 46 I prefer. No matter where it is, if it's 100 feet down, it's 100 feet down. You got to get your lines in that cold water, and that fish hawk helps you do that. You try to match your top speed to your bottom speed, which I try to stay between 2.6 and 2.8 miles per hour. Sometimes they like it a little hot, 3 miles per hour, but before I put lines in the water, I got to find that temperature break, that cold water where the currents are and everything. Like Lake Ontario, where we fish, obviously you know, Chris, it's green water. We have Lake Erie water coming out of Niagara River, and Lake Ontario water is cold and blue, and that's like oil and water. They don't mix. They cause tons of temperature breaks, tons of currents. So if we did find a cold water, what I would do is I would run 4 wire rods. I would have 2 low dipsies and I would have 2 high dipsies. And the high dipsies would be in the 30 to 40 feet column. The low dipsies would be in the 50 to 60. And then my riggers would be the deepest, and I double stack them. Not with 2 rods, but I put a cheater rod on it.
Very good. Is this a spoon program, or what are you doing?
We are starting to get into the times where we're using meat rigs right now. So I would use, I like spin doctors a lot more. I believe they're 9-inch spin doctors. I prefer White Glow, Mountain Dew, the Pro-Am color that Tom Allen makes over at Atomic. It's like a darker green with a white glow head on there.
So, and you talked about a little bit, but when you've got that river flowing in there, you're looking for temperature, but you also have some serious currents to deal with there too. There's a lot of structure to the east of you, and then you just have all of that current blowing in there. Tell us about some of the kind of the challenges of fishing that area.
It can be a headache. I mean, it's different every day. I mean, if you get a heavy northeast wind, it might push the Niagara River current way more west towards Canada. And certain times of year, we need that green water, like early spring, for example, late April, beginning of May, going into the early months of June. You kind of want warmer water, but then you don't. And constantly, it's just on the move. Wherever the wind is, the current goes opposite. You'll be out there, be flat calm, and all of a sudden you get just a temperature wave rolling on by. So you know there's a temperature break right there. The Niagara River is pushing, I think it's 2,000 cubic feet a second. So the current goes for a ways. I mean, you'll get current all the way almost to the middle of the lake out by the 19 line.
Let's talk a little bit about the river. I mean, that's one place, when I see pictures from out there and I see the guys that are out fishing the river, I mean, it just looks incredible to me. Tell me about what a day is like fishing the lower Niagara.
I love the Niagara River fishing. I actually built my business on the Niagara River. I was just planning on being a full-time lower river guide, and it turned into more than that. You never know what you're going to catch in the Niagara River. We fish all the way up from Devil's Hole. Well, this is the lower river. So the river is upper and lower, but we're talking about the lower river right now. We fish anywhere from Devil's Hole all the way out to the Niagara Bar, depending on certain times of the year. You usually start fishing the Niagara River in October when we get a salmon run. It's been iffy the past couple of years. It's hit or miss. I mean, it used to be glory days, catch 20 fish. Now you're catching 5 to 10. Once early November starts, that's when the river fishing is really good. I mean, you go out there, the lake trout are spawning, and then you'll catch maybe 30 to 40 lake trout. And they're not small. I mean, you're getting 20, 30-pound lake trout, big lake trout. Then the brown trout move in around December, and we're out targeting them by the mouth of the river. Actually, closest to the lake is where the browns usually are hanging out. And then the steelhead moving. And they're all together. But the Niagara River, you get monster walleye, you get monster steelhead, you get giant lake trout, you get everything in there. You really never know what you're going to catch. You hook into a smallmouth in the middle of January, February, and then all of a sudden you got a muskie in your line. So, and the scenery alone is gorgeous down there.
Right. That's the thing that I see is the scenery. And I mean, it'd be really fun to get a picture with a fish just in this area. Tell me a little bit about how you're targeting those fish when you're fishing in there in the wintertime.
So I use different methods. They're pretty much all the same. They're on a 3-way rig on a 7.5-foot rod, like a medium light, medium fast action spinning rod. I don't use bait casters because sometimes people get intimidated by them. So what we do is we have a 3-way swivel. I don't have them here, for example, but if we have a 3-way, obviously it comes out like a T, and I use a Thunder Mist swivel, which the middle will turn. And what I would do, here's my main line coming down, and I use all mono. I don't use braid. Some guys prefer braid, a little more sensitive. I think just get a sensitive more rod. I do a 1-foot lead to a pencil sinker, which would be 1 3/4 to 2 ounce. And then I do a 6 to 7-foot lead to a size 12 Blackbird hook. And some days I'm putting a 8, 10 millimeter bead on there, depending on water clarity with a minnow, sometimes just the bead itself, especially in November. We're usually bead fishing. And what you're doing is you're hugging the bottom. You're literally keeping that sinker as much as you can until it bounces the bottom up and down. And you don't want to drag it. You just want to tick in every little wave you can. As close to the bottom as possible is the best. Keep your presentation as natural as it can. And then once December, January, February come, which February is my favorite time of the year, it's a little more challenging. It's colder. You're most likely going to get more steelhead than anything. And we're using egg sacks, and our dominant color for egg sacks is pink, and I tie them the size of a nickel, and it's a dime, depending on the water clarity. I won't go no bigger than a nickel. If you pop them in the nose with it, they're going to hit it. And you pretty much, you don't set the hook. You just let them take it because you're using such a tiny, tiny hook. You'll pull it right out of your mouth.
So this is rod in hand kind of work.
Yes,
You're out there on the river. There's obviously a lot of current in that river, especially in the lower side. How do you kind of handle boat control in those kind of situations?
We use bob mount trolling motors. I have a 72-inch, 36-volt, 112-pound thrust Altera on this new boat. I was using a Tarova. I don't think a difference between the two. I prefer to have the Tarova over the Altera in the winter because that gas piston could freeze on you. Rumor I heard. But it's just on off. If you're using bait, you keep your boat pointing into the current, your bow in there, and you're going on off, and you're watching your lines. If you're going behind the boat or in front of the boat, you need to slow down or speed up. Keep your line straight up and down as possible. Now, if I'm going to pull plugs, which is a whole other thing we do, you use the same setup as you did with a shorter lead, like a 4 or 5 foot lead, and I use Yakima bait mag lips, and I take the front hook off, and they're size 3.0 with a slinky weight, which is like common. Guys know about it in Salmon River. They're just a paracord with a pencil, not pencil. It's what the heck am I trying to think? Split shot inside of it. And what that would do is when the drag's on the bottom, it'll flex on the rocks so it don't snag. Because you want that lure digging into the rocks on the bottom.
Very cool. What's that like out there? And I know this is a fishery that a lot of people know about. A lot of people want to go out there and get on these fish. Is this kind of a battleground out there, or do you got some room out there? What's it like out in the river that time of year?
November, the month of October, not a battleground at all. It's mostly all guides that have to going up in Devil's Hole. You really got to know what you're doing up there. The current's constantly changing. The water level's going up and down, and I don't recommend it for anybody going in there unless you're with somebody who knows how to navigate the water or you're with a local guide. Month of October is like battle fishing. It is because you're below Devil's Hole in the Yard Park side where the water's a little faster, but it's still calm. And once deer season really starts going full swing in New York, you don't see nobody out there, and it's just all local guides. I mean, a busy day would probably be 15 to 20 boats on the river, and they're all guides. Maybe 1 or 2 occasional fun fishermen.
Yeah, that seems to be in my neck of the woods when the fishing gets good too, is once the deer season opens, you kind of get the lakes yourself. It's a good time out there. Yep. Tell me a little bit about fishing the other side of the river, the upper river. What's that like?
So the upper river it's actually the best thing I think about the upper river is the muskie fishing. If you're going to go out there, it's in October, November. It's when the muskie are starting to spawn the most. I think that's the best fishery for muskie in our local area. And I don't do it too much. I prefer not to. The smallmouth bass fishing is phenomenal. If you can't get out on Lake Erie, say it's a really bad day, small craft advisory, we do go into the upper Niagara, and you catch 5-6 pound smallmouth in there. The fishery is just as good. You get a lot of walleye as well because it is connected to Lake Erie and it's separated by Niagara Falls.
How are you targeting those muskies?
Again, like I said, I'm not too big into it, but I have done it. A lot of guys up here, we use live suckers, and we're using like 10, 12-inch suckers with big Colorado blades, plain silver with like an English rig. What you would do is you hook it on the back on the sucker fish, and it's like a worm harness, but it's one giant hook with a treble on the back end of it, and it's just got a big Colorado blade, and we're 3-way swivel in it as well, bottom bouncing, dragging, drifting with the current.
Very cool. So you're a multi-species, multi-waterway angler charter. How do you kind of make that decision? I mean, it's one of those things that, if you've got a big boat and it's sitting in one port, well, you know what you're doing every day when you get up. But when you've got so many different options, what's that like for you? Do you think that it's a detriment almost having so many options to choose from when you're going to go out on the water?
Yeah, sometimes it can be a little too overwhelming. There's times, like I said, you're in Lake Erie and the next day somebody calls you, or that night if you're open the next day, like, we want to go catch kings. You're like, damn. If you're not out there, it's a learning curve. You got to know where the fish are, so you kind of call your buddies that are out there full time and you ask them where they're at. And you get a general idea. You don't know exactly. They move. Fish move all the time. I like it though. I like going from lake to lake because I'm ready for the next change always. Like if I'm on Lake Erie for 10 days, I kind of want to prepare for that. So I'm ready to go on Lake Ontario and watch the rods bend and hear the drag screaming on them. So it's a little more productive more than walleye. It's a lot more faster pace and keeps you on your toes a lot more.
And again, you're a small boat charter, so you're running, a trailerable boat. So your typical charter is going to be 2-3 guys on board with you.
Usually average is 2 to 3. I do take up to 4. I have taken 5. 5 is a little. In this boat, it's not bad. It is a little tight, but in the last boat, it wasn't doable at all. Like I said, like you said as well, the average guy is 2 to 3 people, and it's actually pretty nice. And I do like smaller boats a little more because it is more versatile. Like, say if you guys booked a charter, you didn't want to go out in 6-7 footers on Ontario, I'll be like, well, Lake Erie's calm. You guys want to go catch fish? And instead, I wasn't dedicated to one marina. I can go anywhere I want.
Yeah, that's obviously a big advantage of having that small boat. You can pick up and go somewhere where you can get on the water. And if it's really bad, go fish the river or something. It keeps your dates, keeps you from losing your dates out there. How much teaching goes on your charters? I mean, are you out there and really helping these guys learn how to understand how to catch the fish? Or is it just kind of more or less, here's the rod, reel in the fish?
It's hit or miss. I have some customers that come out with me and they don't really care what you're doing or what you're doing, just catch them a fish. They just want to reel in fish. And I get guys that are local people that have boats and they want to learn a thing or two because they're not doing as well. So they ask every little detail from how do you tie your knots all the way, like why would you set your rigger out 100 feet back with a worm harness on there, or 30 or 20 feet closest to the ball for a salmon with a spoon on it. It's variety. It's a mixed pack of people doing that, but most of the time I'm explaining everything, what's going on, so they can kind of educate themselves. If I'm not paying attention and they see a rod go, they're not waiting for me to grab it and the fish is gone. They kind of know what they're looking for.
Well, Captain, I really appreciate you coming on today, hanging out with us for a little bit. Is there something I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about today?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah. I appreciate you inviting me on the show.
All right, it's Captain Richard Brant, and he is from Real Action Charters. And Richard, you're also on the Instagram. Tell us a little bit about your IG and how maybe people can reach out to you other than that website.
Well, you can just shoot me a message on Instagram. It's Real Action Charters 95, and I have Facebook. It's Real Action Charters, and just rebuilt the website. I have to take down the realactioncharter.com. It's actually www.realactioncharters.biz. It's a newer site. It's a lot better. New logo, all that, all the tons of prices, better pictures of more fish as well. On the front page, there is a new fish on there that is pretty big in the area. We did catch a 27-pound brown trout out of Wilson last year in August.
Wow.
Hopefully you can come with me and you can try to do the same.
Yeah, that sounds good. Going after a 20-plus pound brown, I got to go check that out myself.
Yeah.
All right, Captain Richard Brant, really appreciate you coming on. Thanks to everyone for watching and listening this time. We'll talk to you on the next show.